Hey YouTube, Tom Houston with Tom Houston Photography here. In this video I will be talking about the page section of our road trip. And it is a little too long to make into one video, so I'm going to cut out Antelope Canyon and make its own video after this, just because there's so much information I have to share about that place, and it was just so epic that I don't really want to compress it. So Antelope Canyon will have its own video coming up after this one. So I will start with the rest of it so that this video is also semi-short. So we drove from Flagstaff to the North Rim, and then from the North Rim we made it to Page before sunset, which was the game plan, because then we could visit Horseshoe Bend. So we stayed at the Days Inn in Page, which is the furthest south hotel you can stay at, and it was a great idea because we were really close to Horseshoe Bend and Antelope Canyon, as well as it was a good place to stay, and they had very helpful staff. We had a couple questions about what to see and where to eat and all that stuff, and they were really helpful. So we got to Page that night, and then we drove to Horseshoe Bend after we got checked in, which is like 10 minutes from there, maybe less. And then you park at a parking lot and you hike on a very sandy, semi-rocky trail up a hill, and then you just kind of meander down towards the river. In Horseshoe Bend, if you don't know what it looks like, Google it or just wait for my photo at the end of this. But it is a huge carved, basically horseshoe shape part of the river when it meanders of, I believe it's Glen Canyon, by the Colorado River. And it is huge. It's, I believe I read somewhere it's 1,000-foot vertical, so it's a huge drop. That's 100 stories. And it's just really big and very cool to see. So I highly recommend going there. It is definitely worth the semi-short hike. It was about a mile or so, roughly. So anyways, when you get there, there's no railings or anything, so watch your footing. You don't want to take a 1,000-foot header into the Colorado River. Probably not a safe bet. But the really cool thing about Horseshoe Bend is there are campsites. You have to look really closely, but there are campsites kind of on the sand depositions on the certain parts of the on the river, and it's cool because people drive motorboats to them, so you can actually get the perspective of how big Horseshoe Bend is by these motorboats that sometimes drive through the canyon. So in my panorama I took of it, I actually have a boat that's docked dead center in the bend at one of the campsites there, and it just adds so much perspective, and you just get to realize just how big that canyon is, that this little tiny blue speck is actually a motorboat. Anyways, I highly recommend going there. So we went there for sunset, got some sweet shots, and then we stayed the night at the Days Inn, and then we drove to Lake Powell for sunrise, which was pretty cool to see. Not the best for photos. I did get a really cool photo of that, but the sun was just so bright and right in your face, because where we were on the west side of the lake, so the sun was right in your face when it rose. Then after that we drove to actually back to Horseshoe Bend for sunrise, so we got the tail end of the golden hour at Horseshoe Bend, and it was kind of cool to see that in a different light with the sun coming from your back into the canyon rather than from the front, because it just lights up the different half of the side of the river. Anyways, so we did that, and then we hiked to the Hanging Gardens, which is a pretty cool hike. And the best part for me was we actually hiked off the trail and climbed up one of the rocks, and it was this huge vista of like Lake Powell and then down Lake Powell, and it was really cool to see. Highly recommend doing that. So if you can hike up any rock and get up in elevation, I recommend doing that. Just be safe because the sandstone there does become pretty brittle, so it does fall apart, so watch your footing. And then after that we drove to Antelope Canyon, which I will make a whole separate video on with a lot of detail, but just for this video, for its purpose, it was an amazing place. I would say it's one of the top places we saw on this whole trip, so I highly recommend going to Antelope Canyon. But I will warn you, it is super busy, and we weren't even there in peak season. It is a little expensive because this year they just raised their prices to actually try to deter less people from coming so that it's not as busy, but I'm guessing it's not going to have any effect whatsoever. So Antelope Canyon was amazing. I took like 300 and something photos in an hour. I probably didn't actually look at the canyon that much without looking through my camera, which is a bit of a bummer, but when you're there you'll understand why. So anyways, I will have more on that in my next video. So after Antelope Canyon, we drove to Monument Valley, which was to me, the stereotypical Southwest landscape, and you pay because it's the Navajo land, so that $80 park pass doesn't cover the Navajo territory. So you pay to get in, you just drive to the visitors center, and then from there you can do a tour into the canyon or drive your own vehicle in. I decided to just take shots from the visitors center because it was actually on a high elevation, so you're roughly shooting in line with the buttes instead of at ground level at the buttes. So I thought this would help with making my panorama rather than shooting up at the buttes. And so we didn't go down into the actual valley. I didn't think we need to, but when you're there you can make that call. But it was an amazing landscape. It was really cool to see. I got my one panorama of it, and then I was content. And they had a pretty cool museum. So in this trip, it was me and my dad and I, and he likes all the natural history of the place, so he actually just stayed in the museum part of the visitor center for a bit, which was good. I did my photography, and then we came out, walked around a little, and then we got out of there and drove back to Page. So all in all, Page has some very cool places around it, and I highly recommend just making Page like your hub for a bit. They have a restaurant called the Rainbow Room, which is at one of the resorts on Lake Powell. It was a pretty interesting place. It was really nice. We actually didn't ever get there while it was daylight out. I guess that's one of the curses of being a photographer, is you shoot till the sun's down, which is another tip I have. If you are doing that, make sure you have places to go to dinner and find out when they close, because if you're going to be shooting till 9:30, it's a good idea to have a game plan of where you're going to eat, or you end up eating at like a fast food restaurant. But if you like doing that on your trips, by all means, go for it. Same tips, bring lots of water so you actually stay hydrated and don't get delirious. We didn't get dehydrated at all, but I'm sure lots of people do when they do this, so stay hydrated. Bring proper footwear. It's always a good idea to have a nice pair of hiking boots along. I had a badass pair that my dad got me, but my dad's hiking shoes actually fell apart on the first day in Boynton Canyon in Sedona, but he runs every single morning, so he just wore running shoes, and he had strong enough ankles that he probably wasn't going to roll his ankle, but I highly recommend wearing proper footwear for hiking because it can get a little iffy with the terrain, but take that if you will, if you want. And again, I'll make that video for Antelope Canyon to go with this, and it's pretty much it for the page area. Highly recommend going there. It was really cool to see, and get that. I don't think anywhere we went there you needed that pass, but it is still very good to have that $80 pass because all the other places we went we needed it. So I believe that's it, so I'll end my video there. So if you want to check out my shots, I'll toss a couple up after this, and if you want to see my panoramas I took, they're on my website, which I'll put the link below, as well as my blog. And if you don't have YouTube to ask me questions, you can find my email on my website, or you can find me on Twitter, so I'll also put my Twitter account below. So I hope that helps, and again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I'll be more than willing to help if you're planning a trip to Arizona or photography things in general. So that is Paige, and stay posted for more videos, and my next one will be on Antelope Canyon. So I hope that helps. Cheers.